The slap rang out like a gunshot in the first-class cabin of Horizon Air Flight 214, slicing through the hum of soft jazz and clinking glasses. It was sharp, unprovoked, and utterly shocking. The murmur of affluent travelers sipping complimentary wine and discussing stock portfolios froze. Even the jet engines seemed to pause, as if the Boeing 737 itself recoiled. Margaret Ellis, seated by the window in 1A, flinched, her arthritic hands trembling as she turned to her husband, Arthur, in 1B. "Did she just hit you?" he whispered, his voice frail with disbelief. Margaret didn't answer. Her cheek burned, but she didn't touch it. She didn't cry out or demand an apology. Instead, she reached into her navy leather tote, pulled out a sleek tablet, and opened an app with a subtle blue icon labeled Ethos Air. One tap, and somewhere in the cloud, a system no one in this cabin knew existed began to unravel Horizon Air's fate. 2 minutes earlier, everything had been calm. Margaret and Arthur, both in their late 70s, had boarded last to avoid the chaos of overhead bins and hurried passengers. Margaret guided Arthur gently down the aisle, her arm looped through his. He hummed a faint tune from a Sinatra song, his steps slow but deliberate. "Steady, love," she murmured, smiling as they reached their seats 1A and 1B, first class, booked 6 months ago. Arthur's memory flickered these days, and being close to Margaret kept him grounded at 35,000 feet. She settled him by the window, then turned to stow her bag. That's when Carla Bennett appeared. Carla, a senior flight attendant with a crisp uniform and a smile as thin as her patience, held a tablet and spoke with clipped authority. "Ma'am, I need you to move to 3C. This seat's been reassigned." Margaret blinked, her voice calm but firm. "I booked these seats together. My husband needs me nearby." Carla sighed, loud enough for nearby passengers to glance over. A platinum-tier passenger requested 1B. "Reassignments happen. Please move." Margaret stood taller. "Arthur has medical needs. I'm staying. Please fix this." Carla's eyes narrowed. "If you wanted guaranteed seats, you should have chartered a jet." And then, without warning, she slapped Margaret across the face. The crack echoed. Arthur froze, mouth agape. A woman in 1D gasped, dropping her phone. A man in 2A muttered, "What the hell?" Passengers stared, some pulling out phones to record. Margaret, unruffled, sat beside Arthur, opened her tablet, and logged in with a thumbprint. A soft chime. "Welcome, Mrs. Ellis." Executive authority confirmed. She tapped an icon labeled Override Horizon Air Compliance. One tap, and Horizon Air's ethical rating plummeted on a system linked to the FAA, European regulators, and a $4 billion ESG portfolio. Margaret slipped the tablet back into her bag as if she'd just ordered coffee. Carla, oblivious, strutted up the aisle, basking in her authority. She'd done this before shut-down complaints, reminded passengers who was in charge. She didn't know who she'd just struck. Arthur, confused, leaned closer. "Did something happen?" Margaret took his hand, her smile faint. "Nothing to worry about, dear. Just watch." Across the aisle, a younger flight attendant, Ethan Parker, stood by the drink cart, eyes wide. He'd seen the slap, the tap, and now he was connecting dots. Whispering Ellis, he pulled up his staff directory, fingers flying. Margaret Ellis, Ethos Capital, founder, senior ethics evaluator, executive authority on Ethos Air Gateway. The system that rated airlines' ethical compliance in real time. The system that just flagged Horizon Air as non-compliant. In the cockpit, alerts flooded the first officer's screen. Flight H214 marked ethically non-compliant. 68 active flights suspended. FAA requests immediate report. The captain stared, bewildered. What happened back there? Ethan approached, hands shaking, and showed his device. "I think we just slapped the woman who decides if we fly." Margaret sat still, her lavender scarf draped elegantly over her shoulders. She looked like someone's grandmother heading to a family reunion in Charlotte, not the architect of aviation's most powerful ethics system. Decades ago, from her home office in Raleigh, North Carolina, she'd built Ethos Capital, a fund rooted in one principle: money flows where values thrive. While others chased profit in the 90s, Margaret pioneered ESG compliance, tying investments to environmental, social, and governance standards. Her fund now managed $4 billion, with her signature controlling $1.8 billion in airline investments. Then came Ethos Air Gateway, a platform she designed to score airlines on passenger treatment, staff conduct, and equitable policies. It wasn't just a tool, it was the global standard, used by the FAA, European regulators, and insurers. Fall below the benchmark, and your license was at risk. Margaret held the override key. Today, she'd used it. Carla, still unaware, patrolled the aisle. Passengers whispered, their stares piercing. In the galley, Ethan handed his tablet to a colleague, Lisa, who gasped. Margaret Ellis? She wrote our ethics training. And Carla slapped her. Up front, the cockpit door cracked open. The first officer's face was pale, his tablet glowing with urgent messages. Margaret's tablet, tucked in her bag, displayed a faint notice. H214 compliance downgrade confirmed. Suspension advisory issued to FAA, EU ports. Notifications sent. Within an hour, 68 Horizon flights were grounded. By day's end, 3 European airports banned their planes. By week's end, Horizon CEO, David Thornton, would face cameras, signing an ethics charter he'd once ignored. Arthur stirred. You okay, sweetheart? Margaret nodded. I'm fine. He squeezed her hand. Good. Whoever touched you doesn't know who they're messing with. She chuckled softly. Clearly not. Carla, sensing unease, noticed passengers staring. The intercom crackled. Ms. Bennett, report to the cockpit immediately. Her jaw tightened. She marched forward, unaware the captain was piecing together her catastrophic mistake. Inside the cockpit, the first officer laid it out. Horizon's flagged non-compliant on Ethos Air. Margaret Ellis, who you slapped, runs the system. Amsterdam and Frankfurt just denied landing rights. The FAA wants a report before we descend. What did you do? Carla stiffened. She refused to move. I followed protocol. The captain cut in, voice like steel. You slapped her. You're off duty. Sit in the galley. The FAA will handle you on landing. Carla's face flushed, but she said nothing, storming out. Passengers watched her retreat, some whispering, others filming. As she passed Margaret, their eyes met briefly. Margaret's gaze calm, saying without words, you just learned the hard way. Ethan stepped forward, now lead attendant. Mrs. Ellis, can I get you anything? Water? Tea? Margaret's voice was gentle. Chamomile, warm, no sugar. And Ethan? Kindness matters, especially with a uniform's power. He nodded, hurrying off. In the galley, Carla sat alone, typing frantically in a group chat with other attendants. Some old lady flagged the flight. FAA's involved. A reply pinged. Ellis? She owns our ethics approvals. You're done. Carla's phone buzzed with an HR email, temporary suspension pending investigation. Her career was crumbling before the plane touched down. First class buzzed. She didn't argue. A man in 2A said. Just tapped something, and now the airline's toast. Another passenger whispered. Who is she? Margaret sipped her tea, ignoring the chatter. Arthur dozed beside her, hand resting on hers. Then the cabin screens flickered, displaying, Notice, Flight Ethics Investigation in Progress. A voice boomed over the PA. David Thornton, Horizon CEO. As of 9:04 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, Horizon Air has been flagged non-compliant on Ethos Air Gateway, triggered from this flight. We're under FAA and EASA investigation for an ethics breach. Landing permissions in Frankfurt, Dublin, and Madrid are suspended. To Mrs. Margaret Ellis in 1A, I offer my public apology. We failed your dignity and the system you built. The crew member is suspended, and we're implementing the Ellis Protocol fleet-wide. We ask for your guidance to regain compliance. The cabin went silent. Heads turned to Margaret, who set down her tea and tapped her tablet. Authorize Ethics Reconciliation Review, conditional. The screens updated. Ethics Oversight and Review. In the galley, Lisa whispered to Ethan, they might shut down the airline because of Carla. Ethan shook his head. Margaret's not just an old lady. She's legacy. Carla's the cautionary tale. Upon landing in Chicago, Carla was escorted off by security, her walk quiet but heavy with consequence. Margaret and Arthur were whisked to a private lounge, declining interviews. She sipped Earl Grey, reading a novel while Arthur napped. Her assistant, Sarah, texted, should we issue a statement? Margaret replied, integrity speaks louder than words. Let the data talk. News broke globally. Horizon stock fell 18%. Social media exploded with Ellis Protocol. A viral photo of Margaret stepping off the plane captioned, she didn't yell. She tapped. Ethics wins. By evening, David Thornton faced reporters, sweating. We're adopting the Ellis Protocol and rewriting crew training under Mrs. Ellis's guidance. A reporter pressed, "Is the FAA overseeing your systems?" Thornton nodded. "We've accepted their oversight." In Raleigh, Margaret's estate sat quietly behind magnolia trees. From there, she'd built Ethos Capital and Ethos Air, driven by a belief that dignity wasn't negotiable. Married to Arthur for 55 years, they'd raised 2 daughters, lost one, and navigated his dementia with grace. Now, in their 70s, they'd earned their peace until Carla's slap. That night, as Horizon's board scrambled, Margaret sat with Arthur by a fireplace. He hummed. She adjusted his scarf. "I didn't want it this loud," she said. Arthur chuckled. "You didn't say a word. That's the problem. Quiet women make the loudest noise." Weeks later, at the 2025 Aviation Ethics Summit in Seattle, Margaret entered unannounced, taking a seat meant for Horizon's absent CEO. Whispers spread. "That's her." She didn't speak until a regulator asked her to comment. Standing, she said, "Dignity isn't a metric. It's whether your grandmother feels safe in coach." She placed a folder on the table, the Global Passenger Ethics Charter. "Sign within 30 days for Ethos Air certification. Refuse, and you'll be listed as non-compliant." The room erupted. CEOs lined up to meet her. By night's end, she'd redrawn aviation's future without a microphone. In D.C., FAA officials met Margaret in a secure room. She presented the charter: crew audits, whistleblower protections, real-time reporting. "Integrated into certifications by Q4, she said, "or passengers will judge your failure." The FAA issued a bulletin recognizing the Ellis framework. Leaked to the press, it sparked headlines. FAA adopts Ellis Charter. Airlines face 60-day compliance deadline. By spring, 22 airlines signed. Complaints dropped 40%. Trust in aviation soared. Airports displayed passenger fairness index scores. Passengers chose flights based on ethics. Margaret boarded a flight to Boston, economy class, with Arthur. The crew was kind, helping a mother with a crying baby and an elderly man without fuss. The captain announced, "Our crew earned an A+ on the Ellis Index." Margaret smiled, resting against the window. Peace, at last. In Raleigh, she gardened, ignoring offers from the UN, Harvard, and publishers. A plaque at O'Hare's Unity Terminal honored her, but she never visited. Arthur handed her a UN letter nominating her for a humanitarian medal. "My reward," she said, "is knowing you can fly without being moved." A year later, on a flight from Atlanta to Denver, a flight attendant helped an elderly man, saying, "We'll keep you with your wife. It's our Ellis rule." A young woman behind them teared up, inspired to join aviation. The FAA reported a 50% drop in disputes, 65% faster complaint resolutions, and record-high trust. Margaret, pruning roses, read a letter from a girl. "I want to be the lady who makes planes kind." She smiled. It was worth everything. The Ellis Charter reshaped not just aviation, but cruise lines, trains, and rideshares. At JFK, a sculpture of 2 hands on an armrest bore her name. Margaret never saw it. She walked with Arthur, their garden blooming. The world had changed, not with noise, but with her quiet tap. What did you think of Margaret's response to violence and injustice? Have you witnessed quiet dignity shift a system? Share your thoughts below. Do you believe one person can hold power accountable? Or was Carla's punishment too harsh? Let's debate.